Howdy, boys and girls. Welcome back. It is week 12 of the college football season. Even though it doesn't feel like November, it feels like we've just jumped into the middle of bowl season because it's really cold in Pittsburgh and in Nashville.
It is.
It is. This is the Carla and Crappy Show. Carla is, it's actually colder in Nashville than it is in Pittsburgh right now.
It is. It's colder in Nashville than it is in Denver at the moment, which is fun.
Okay.
So yeah, we're sitting at it is a Tuesday evening as we are recording this, and we are sitting at a balmy 13 degrees outside. We got a half inch of snow last night, which is the earliest that I can remember having snow as long as I've lived down here, and I've been down here for almost a decade now, which is crazy in and of itself. It has been a decade since I moved down here, but yeah, half inch of snow, just enough to kind of gnarl everything up this morning. Everybody went to school though, so I don't want to hear the Southerners don't know how to handle snow. They don't go to school. Yes, we had 2-hour delays because we don't have that many salt trucks, and they needed to treat the roads.
Legit thing. That's a legit thing. Sure.
But everybody went to school today. They just went a little late, including me. I went a little late, but yeah. So I've got a hot cocktail tonight. Some cider.
So toddy kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah. I got cider and a little Jack, and it's warming me up.
I'm just I'm sticking with beer because 20 degrees is not quite cold enough for, well, I don't know. If that had occurred to me sooner, a toddy would have been not a bad deal. I tend to stick to those when I'm not feeling my best.
Yeah.
Because the medicinal sort of properties there are really helpful. But the other thing I just, in the interest of disclosure, right now you will see me kind of glancing this way, and that's because on the old iMac on my desk behind my MacBook is Maction. It's my Bobcats against the Western Michigan dog and pony show. I think they're Mustangs or something like that.
Yeah.
We're in the fourth quarter. OU is down 24-17, but driving. So if I'm a little distracted, that's what's going on.
I was distracted during my show prep, so I want to give a shout out to the opening of the new arena at Robert Morris, my alma mater.
Yeah.
And they
landed Pitt for that game, which is really cool.
For that game, which was awesome. It was a standing room only crowd. They doubled the capacity of the old Chuck. 4,000 people now can be there, and it was completely sold out and packed to the gills. And the game was on ESPNU. And so kudos to my alma mater. They didn't win. They lost by like 15, but they were in the game in the first half. And kudos to my alma mater for opening a new facility. We will always miss the Chuck. It's always a little sentimental when you got 2 degrees.
Yeah.
In that building, and it's still kind of the same building. They just renovated it. But yeah, I can't wait to go check it out in person next time I'm home. And yeah, so it's basketball season. It's all kinds of stuff.
Nice, very nice. As a bonus, Bob Dylan played, from what I understand, was a very good show there on Sunday night.
I heard that. Yes, Sarah Burrell is playing there or has played there.
I think has played there.
Has played there, yeah.
And I don't know.
I thought about making the trip home for that.
Outside my wheelhouse. Okay, we're gonna eventually. We're talking about the weather and basketball and Bob Dylan, and maybe we should talk about football. Do you think we should do a little football? Okay. No.
I'm still mad about last weekend.
Well, okay. Which is a perfect lead-in for me to ask you: is there anything that stuck out for you from last weekend?
I'm holding that until we talk about Minnesota later in the show.
Okay.
But I so to take my mind off of the fact that Penn State defense couldn't figure out the run pass option to save their lives last week, and kudos to Minnesota who game planned that game beautifully.
They really did.
I mean that they executed that run pass option or the RPO better than I've seen them run it all season. And they just had the Penn State defense on its heels all day. Kudos to Penn State for fighting back in it. Had a chance to win it there at the end. Too many turnovers. And it's the same thing we've been griping about for the last several years is the strange play calling at certain points in the game, the decision to go for 2. There's some head scratchers there. And that's been something that's kind of plagued this program for the last 3 to 4 years. So, they're still in the hunt to get a good bowl game. It kind of confirms some things heading into the big matchup with Ohio State that I'm not happy about. But again, I'll talk a little bit more about Minnesota later. I thought I would do something fun.
Yes.
because it's cold and why not do something fun? And I forgot to do this earlier in the season. Something called the transitive property of college football.
Right.
Which is for those that aren't familiar with it, it's if one team beats another team, then that means that if team X beats team Y,
Right.
and team Z beats team X, then the team should,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We're not math people, so I think you all understand what's going on here. Yeah. So there was a really, really big win that happened kind of under everybody's radar last weekend that led to one of the best lines of transitive property of college football that we've had in several seasons.
Okay.
And that was Appy State knocking off South Carolina.
Yes.
That happened. They won 20-15 on Saturday. So that now means that according to the transitive property of college football, Troy would beat Georgia, because here's how the line works. Right. So it's short. So Georgia was beat by South Carolina.
Right.
South Carolina got beat by Appy State.
Yes.
Appy State got beat by Georgia Southern.
Yes.
Georgia Southern got beat by Troy. Therefore,
there you go.
Troy beats Georgia.
Okay.
It's just we haven't had one that good in a long time.
We haven't.
So I stumbled into that one today, and I was like, that's a pretty darn good one, because anytime you get a Fun Belt team that beats an SEC team, you can usually do a pretty fun transitive. And that's a pretty darn good one. And I could have gone further past Troy, but then you get into the weird, like if like somebody had beaten Troy, but then Appy State beat them, then that messes up the line. So that doesn't work.
And the impressive thing, if not for Clemson, Appalachian State has won the championship of the Carolinas, pretty much.
Yeah, which is crazy.
But yeah, I mean, that was, and I watched a bit of that game last weekend. Very, very cool to see them do well. And the season they're having, just noteworthy with the wins that they have over the big brother schools. That's a touchdown for my Bobcats right there. Woo! An extra point will tie the game up with 10 minutes left. Just as an update.
Appy State's ranked in the new playoff rankings. They snuck in at number 25. So I love it when little guys get involved.
It's awesome. It is awesome. Speaking of the playoff rankings, we have a new set of them as of earlier this evening. Very, very briefly, top 10, LSU. And I expected Ohio State to get jumped with LSU beating Alabama. Yeah. Ohio State number 2, Clemson, Georgia, Bama, Oregon, Utah, Minnesota, Penn State, and Oklahoma. Carla, is this mostly correct, or are there any glaring problems with this list? What do you think?
I think it's mostly correct. I was happy to see the committee put Bama at 5, and give some love to Georgia. Even though technically at this point in the season, that's a really interesting conversation between Georgia and Alabama. And buckle your seatbelts. We're going to have this conversation for the rest of the season.
But I mean, Alabama's eliminated, right? In your mind?
No, they're not. They're not, because of the way we don't know for sure how the committee is going to handle this. If LSU beats Georgia, then who's number 4 at that point? And I still think with Alabama sitting at 5, is Alabama's resume stronger than, let's say, a 1-loss Pac-12 team? So no, I don't think Alabama is out at this point, unfortunately. Okay. I think because they're sitting there at 5, there's still a chance. I think had they dropped to 6 or 7 in this ranking, that would tell me where the committee's mindset was. But the fact they only dropped them to 5, I'm happy that Georgia's at 4. I think at that point, obviously, Alabama has the better loss between the two teams, but I think they're rewarding Georgia's better win, because Georgia does have a couple of stronger wins on the season, and they've got a chance to improve that again this weekend. We'll talk about that. So I'm happy to see Georgia at 4, Auburn or Bama at 5. I still don't know about these Pac-12 teams. That's the thing that's kind of the head scratcher for me. Like they're sitting in prime real estate. Oregon is now sitting, a second team out. I don't know. Is Oregon for real? Like the way the Pac-12 keeps beating each other up, I'm not 100% convinced yet that 2 Pac-12 teams should be sitting that high. And why is Minnesota undefeated after one of the most impressive wins of the season so far, sitting back at number 8? Like that's. Sure. that's a bit of a head scratcher to me, but I think it's going to work itself out. So I'm good with everything in the top three, 100% behind all that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and when things shake themselves out, we could end up with a bunch of teams with 2 losses, a bunch of really good teams with 2 losses. So the more interesting conversation as we get further down into the season might actually be the middle of the pack, like 6 to 10, to see, because that shakes out some pretty significant bowl appearances. So, but how about you?
The thing that I see with this, I mean, at the outset of the season, when we talked about this a little bit last week, we had a kind of a static top 3 and then wild card, right? Yeah. At that point, it was Bama, Clemson, Georgia in varying orders. Now, I mean, I think we have the same situation. I think we have LSU, Ohio State, Clemson control their own destiny. Win a conference championship, boom, you're in, no sweat. And then you've got this 4th spot. Mm-hmm. I do think, barring a disaster for LSU, I think Alabama's out. I think they are eliminated at this point. Even with the number 5 ranking in this week's playoff rankings, I think they are pretty much eliminated. I wonder about Oregon, or Oregon, Utah. I mean, those are both possibilities. What happens if Minnesota wins out? There's a win against a ranked team this week. If that happens, there's a win against a ranked team in the final game of the season. If that happens, and then Big Ten title game. What if Minnesota has a tight loss in a Big Ten title game? Do they go? Does Baylor, if they win out convincingly, can they sneak in there? Because they'd be undefeated. They're not even in the top 10 at this point. Perhaps my dismissal of Alabama is a bit of wishful thinking, because the Schadenfreude here is very, very strong. but I actually do think, I mean, as I said, barring some kind of disaster for LSU, I see. I think LSU could even win or could even lose a close SEC title game and still finish ahead of Alabama. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah.
See how that works out.
I hope you're right, but I'm not holding my breath.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And that's sort of the dichotomy of Carla and Crappy. Carla's thinking about this stuff, and I'm just like, Alabama sucks. So there it is. There's a whole show in a nutshell. Let's take a look at what's coming up this week, starting with your weekly Clemsoning Index. This is an actual legit top 25 game. I did not look up to see what Wake Forest's
dropped out.
Did they drop out completely?
They dropped out completely out of the playoff ranking. Yep. That
answers that question. Clemson is hosting Wake Forest, which even out of the top 25 is a solid team. Even with that fact, Clemson is favored by 33.5 points. What is your Clemsoning Index this week?
So when I made my show notes, Wake was still ranked. Because we hadn't had the new rankings yet. So the very first thing in my notes here says, does this even count as Clemsoning if it's a ranked opponent?
I've done the same thing. Yeah, that's right.
And I decided that even if Wake was still ranked, that this would count as Clemsoning.
Okay.
Because it's Wake Forest. Like if it was a Louisville team or a team that we're used to seeing being ranked in the top 25, I don't know if it would count as Clemsoning. Wake is not a team. When we think Wake Forest, we don't think top 25. Nope. Right. So I think it's a perception thing. So I was still going to count this as Clemsoning. And so because of that, I have this at a 6.5.
Okay.
A little bit higher than usual, because I do think there's some good things that Wake has going for it. Wake's quarterback Jamie Newman and wide receiver Sage Surratt are a very potent combo. They're really gonna test that Clemson secondary. The challenge here is the same thing that's every team in the ACC this year. I wrote down that the Wake defense is porous at best. Any defense that allows 400 plus yards per game going up against an offense like Clemson's is usually the recipe for not a good game.
Yes.
And then Wake coming off of a pretty substantial loss at Virginia Tech last week, and playing it at Clemson. I don't see Wake pulling this out. I think that line is ridiculous.
Yeah, probably.
But that's why I have it at 6.5 and not a little bit higher.
Okay. I have the index at a 2. And I wrote down, is it Clemsoning if Clemson is beaten by a ranked team? Yes, but a ranked team coming to Clemson means Clemson won't be right for Clemsoning this week, even if it's not a ranked team. I didn't write that. I'm improvising now. I think that the index here is lower because I think Dub was able to sell this one to the point where it's like, this team is Wake has been a top 25 team all season. He can say there was a hiccup here the last week, and maybe they got exposed a little bit, but I don't see Clemson walking into this game and taking it lightly. So that's why my index is at a 2.
Okay.
We actually had an overflow of a top 25 matchups this weekend. We're going to stick to 3 of them, although we kind of snuck Clemson in there, just sort of cheating. But that technically that doesn't count now because Wake isn't anymore. Yeah. So never mind.
Right.
At 3:30 on Saturday, you guys get to sleep in because we start at 3:30 on Saturday when number 4 Georgia visits number 12 Auburn. Georgia is favored on the road by 3 points. What do you think?
Yeah, so the last time we saw Auburn was playing an Ole Miss team, and it wasn't really all that impressive. I mean, we've been impressed with Auburn and Bo Nix, the all-name SEC quarterback, quite a bit this season from the young freshman. But it just seemed like Auburn was completely out of sync against Ole Miss, and they had to hold on late, and they to beat a team that's not all that good, especially by SEC standards. They won that game 20-14 and really had to kind of get lucky there at the end to keep that game from going to overtime or potentially even losing that game. Auburn, the challenge here was that Auburn moved the ball really well, but they couldn't put the ball in the end zone. Their first 4 drives were 2 missed field goals, a fumble, and a punt. But they moved the ball almost 200 yards in that stretch. So it was just one of those they just couldn't finish drives, which is not something that you're used to seeing from Gus Malzahn teams. Now, that being said, Auburn was also missing Jatarvius Whitlow, their running back, who's been out for a couple games now with a knee injury. Everything that I saw today said that, and this is Tuesday, said that he is now listed as probable to play against Georgia. Good news for Auburn. But was that the full problem with the Auburn offense against Ole Miss? I don't know. DJ Williams did a fine job filling in. He had 93 yards on the ground, so they were still getting yards on the ground. Maybe is Whitlow a leader in the huddle for them? I don't know what that dynamic is. Whether that would cause some of that offensive struggle that we've seen out of Auburn the last couple of weeks. Here's the bad thing for Whitlow's return. The Georgia defense happens to be really, really stingy against the run. They only allow 74 yards per game ish. So even with Whitlow back, Auburn's going to really struggle to run the football in this game. And again, we have another game where I'm saying, hi, Bo Nix, welcome to the SEC. This is yet another game where it's going to come down to the arm of Bo Nix if Auburn's going to stay in this game. The other challenge is we have an Auburn offense that is struggling in scoring in the last couple weeks, going up against one of the top scoring defenses in the country in Georgia, only allowing 10 points per game. This is really Georgia's last big test. If you look at their remaining schedule, they have Texas A&M and Georgia Tech left on the schedule. So
not Georgia Tech. That's not going to be a problem.
That's not going to be a problem at all this year. In years past, it used to be because trying to play that darn triple option in the last game of the year was always kind of but they don't. Georgia Tech doesn't run the triple option anymore. So suddenly that game's not, and Georgia Tech's just not good this year. So. They're just not. I can't sugarcoat that any better way. No, Georgia Tech is not good at football this year. So this is really Georgia's last big test to punch their ticket to the Georgia Dome or the new Georgia Dome. So you got to think that Georgia's gonna be fired up for this one. I do like Georgia in this game. I actually think the line's a little light. I actually think that Georgia's going to win this by more than 3 points. And what's interesting about this is Auburn's had a really good season. They've just had a couple stumbles this week. But welcome to the world of SEC fandom, and it's particularly Auburn fandom. There were rumors this week of Gus Malzahn leaving Auburn to go to Arkansas.
I saw that, and wow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Auburn's
that's not
sitting
that's,
at
that's
7-2. and having a great season. They've got one of the most promising quarterbacks coming up. Auburn's going to be a force to be reckoned with the next 2 seasons, if not beyond, if they can keep Bo Nix from going to the draft early. Like, Auburn's going to be just fine. Don't ship Malzahn off to Arkansas. And besides which, you can't afford his payout.
And Gus did not help himself. However, I mean, he gave this, a non-denial denial, which is standard in coaching things. And I'm just like, Gus, what? Just say, no, it's not happening. I'm not going. Yeah. Everything's good here. I'm staying.
Right. So it's like, it's not Auburn. Auburn fans can't be happy unless there's chaos around their program. And they've got a good thing going there now. And now they're trying to upset the apple cart. No. Auburn's going to be just fine. They're probably going to lose this game against Georgia. It shouldn't be a reason to throw away the towel and throw away the season. You're going to be just fine, Auburn. Hang in there.
Okay.
But Georgia wins.
Okay. Western Michigan has just scored the extra point. We'll put them up a full touchdown with a 4:50 left. Carla, if OU scores a touchdown here, kick the extra point and go to overtime or go for 2?
Which team has the better record right now?
I don't know.
Okay, well, where's the game?
They're actually in similar. I mean, they're in different divisions, but they're in similar positions. Neither one is leading their division. Both have bowl hopes.
Where's the game being played? Is it in Athens?
Athens.
It's in Athens. No, you kick the tie and play for overtime.
See, I think that is almost always the right choice. As far as Georgia at Auburn goes, we don't do a whole lot of sports talk staples here. A lot of other people do that stuff, and we don't really shout a whole lot. I'm going to make an exception, and I have a very hot take. I wrote that in capital letters because I think that we don't do this a lot. Jake Fromm is overrated. There's my hot take. And I don't watch Georgia a lot, granted, but every time I turn on this season in particular, I see Jake Fromm missing receivers, underthrowing receivers. I also think a lot about Jake from State Farm and the Khakis, and I don't know if that's part of my problem.
Yes.
But as far as that's my problem. The passing thing is not all his fault. He has. They were actually talking about this on the halftime of my game. There's a young group of receivers at Georgia. He has not meshed with them yet. I contend, however, that's not all on the receivers. That's in part his responsibility. I'm just underwhelmed every time I see him. And part of this, I have a personal involvement with this because I think I think about Justin Fields and who could have been playing quarterback for Georgia this year. I know they're not gonna put a freshman in for a guy who's been there for 6 or 7 years or whatever, however long Jake Fromm has been in Athens. Georgia. I haven't looked. I don't know what my record is as far as picking games this season. It's been pretty good because I've resisted the temptation to make emotional picks. I'm going to blow that off right now. Georgia. I mean, yes, Georgia's back in the top 4, and they have a shot. They have a shot at actually getting back to the playoff, which I with an awful loss to South Carolina, which became more awful when South Carolina lost to Appalachian State. They have a chance to get there. I think Auburn, home underdog. The thing that you didn't discuss in a whole lot of detail is Auburn's defense, which has been solid to really, really good at different points. I think I'm going out on a limb here. I think that's going to be enough, and what Bo Nix can do is going to be just enough to make Jake from State Farm uncomfortable, and Auburn wins this one at home. So there we go. I'm going to be wrong about this. I'm sure. That's how that goes. If you don't want to watch that game, all you have to do is wait a half hour at 4 p.m. on Saturday. Number 8 Minnesota, the undefeated Gophers, visit Iowa. Number 20, Iowa is favored by 2.5 points at home. I will say this about last week. it reminded me a lot of Ohio State Purdue last season, walking into a situation on the road. Everything is stacked up against you, and it felt like, you guys recall, me and a buddy went to the Purdue game.
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt like fate. It felt like from the opening kick, this is not good. I don't know what kind of feel you had watching Penn State last week, but I sort of, like, from the first quarter, it's like, oh, this is not going to work out well for Penn State. I didn't feel that way before the game, but it feels a little bit like Minnesota is having one of those seasons, which could make this an interesting game on the road. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I said on the show last week that Penn State Minnesota felt like a Sparty game to me, and that's normally, Minnesota played the role of Michigan State really well last week, in having the momentum and on the road, tough, and a tough environment. Kudos to the folks up in Minnesota for making that a tough environment.
That was, and I've never seen that up there.
Yeah.
Watching Big Ten games for as long as I have, that was really impressive.
Yeah, it was. And as much as it pained me to be on the losing end of that game, watching everybody storm the field at the end of that game, like, this is something that hasn't happened in Minnesota in a long time. I think back several years ago when Northwestern did this, right? That Northwestern put together that magical run and went to the Rose Bowl, and we watched them storm the field in Evanston how many times, and that's just one of the coolest things ever when you get one of those, like, Big Ten North schools that just puts together a good season and does something like this. So, as much as it sucked to lose that game,
Sure.
The pure football fan in me enjoyed watching what happened after that game. So
Absolutely.
here's what bothers me, though, is what you just said. Minnesota, now the roles are completely reversed, right? So now you have the team going in on the road into a tough environment because we know strange things happen in Iowa City. And, so the roles are reversed here. But my biggest question is after that win over Penn State, you just knocked off number 4 team in the country. What the heck does Minnesota have to do to earn some respect? If you go and look at the ESPN matchup predictor, Iowa has a 60.8 shot of winning this game. Really?
I saw that.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, PJ Fleck is going to take a screenshot and post it all over those walls. I mean, and I legitimately have a beef with this because Iowa has lost to every ranked opponent it has faced this season. Yes. Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin. They have not beaten a ranked team yet. Iowa is a good football team. Prove it. And why are they the home favorite here when you've got a team that's got a better record with more impressive wins? With that win over Penn State is a more impressive win than any win that Iowa has on the season.
Absolutely.
I don't understand why Minnesota didn't get the respect that it now deserves after knocking off a top 5 opponent in the fashion that it beat Penn State last week, because it dominated that game. Penn State was on its heels from like 5 minutes into that game. You could just, like you said, you could just sense it the whole time.
Right away. Yeah.
And that run pass option is legit. That Minnesota runs. They baffled the Penn State defense. They're capable of outscoring an opponent because Minnesota kept up with the Penn State offense when Clifford tried to, make the Penn State offense simply just outscore them because they couldn't figure out how to stop them. And, Minnesota kept up with that. Minnesota forces turnovers. They're number 13 in the country in turnover margin. They forced Sean Clifford into 3 interceptions. He only had 3 all season going into that game. This is... I like Minnesota on the road. I just feel like this, like you're saying, I just feel like this is a team. I was that team that just, like we were talking last week, that just can't quite get there this year. I feel like Minnesota's having a moment, and they're going to ride this wave to the Big Ten title game. I just really feel that. And I think Fleck's going to have them ready to go, and it's going to be a good game for sure. But I like the Gophers.
Okay. I will go through the same caveats you sort of mentioned. Hard to win at Kinnick. I was physical, steady. solid quarterbacking. But they have, as you said, they've played tight games against ranked opponents, haven't won a single one.
Yep.
And that's at home and on the road. The line for this game, to Iowa by 2.5, and that's sort of the standard Vegas signal of like, well, this is a sort of a pick'em game, and we'll get a little bit of love for the home team. But it shows we're not ready to accept that Minnesota might be a good football team.
Right.
I think at this point we know that Minnesota is a good football team. Are they a great football team? We will find out over the next 3 weeks because they have this game on the road. They are at Northwestern, and then they host the Badgers in the final week of the regular season. But they could be a great football team. Watching last weekend's game, Tanner Morgan proved to me, and I had dismissed this kid as a game manager. He is better than that. I was wrong about that. I did know the name of Antoine Winfield Jr. Because of his daddy played at Ohio State and was a standout for the Vikings for many, many, many years, which is why Antoine is a gopher. He is a legit lockdown guy in the defensive backfield. Iowa is the Iowa we expect pretty much every season. This Minnesota team is not the Minnesota team we expect every season. They are much better at the very least. And that's going to be good enough for them to win in Iowa City this weekend. At 7:30 on Saturday, a de facto Big 12 championship or Big 12 championship preview. I don't know how they do that stuff down there anymore. But number 10 Oklahoma at number 13 Baylor. OU is favored by 10. If we're going to talk about disrespect with the previous game, we got to bring it up with this one too, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Although I will say that Baylor has eked out more wins. What did I tell you last week? To pay attention to Baylor TCU. And dang it, I was almost right in that one. Because I really, really thought that TCU had a shot of beating Baylor, and they almost did.
Yeah, almost.
Baylor had to rescue themselves out of that game a couple of times. They had to kick a 51-yard field goal just to send the game to overtime, and then they had to have essentially 2 circus catches from Denzel Mims in overtime, in 2 of the overtimes to lock up that game. So this is a Baylor team that has teetered. They're 9-0. They're undefeated, but they've teetered a number of times in being close to being knocked off by lesser opponents.
Right.
If you go by the transitive property again in this game, and really just looking at common opponents here, right? So both these teams, the Big 12 plays everybody. So the most recent common opponent between them and a good football team was Kansas State. So Oklahoma lost to Kansas State 48-41 on October 26th.
Yes.
Just 3 weeks earlier, Baylor beat K-State 31-12.
Okay.
So you've got a really, really good team, common opponent, within 3 weeks of each other.
I'm sorry, I'm being distracted. I apologize.
That's okay. Did they score?
No.
Okay.
Second and goal.
Okay.
Minute and a half left.
Crappy sitting on his hands. Okay. So Oklahoma Baylor, right? So so common opponent K-State, Baylor beat them. Oklahoma didn't. I think that's kind of a relevant thing here. Immediately you say,
absolutely.
You immediately think Oklahoma's going to win this game, and Oklahoma this year is quite frankly one person. Jalen Hurts is Oklahoma, and if you go dig into the numbers, I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. He's the number 2 player in total offense in the country, behind only Anthony Gordon, who's just thrown his way to being number 1. Jalen Hurts has more rushing yards than. You have to go all the way down. I was looking at total offense numbers for individual players. You have to go all the way down to number 95 on the list to find another player that has as many rushing yards, if not more, than Jalen Hurts.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, if there was a picture next to the definition of dual threat quarterback, it's Jalen Hurts. And the other ridiculous thing is he's averaging 10.9 yards per play. A first down per play. That's just absolutely
It's video game stuff. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. So the key to Auburn or to Baylor to winning this game is stop Jalen Hurts.
Hello.
I mean, that's your game plan. Stop him and
be a speed bump.
Yeah, stop him and you win the game. Can Baylor do that? I'm not sure they can. That's the challenge here. I mean, Baylor's got a good quarterback in their own right, in Charlie Brewer. But the Bears have struggled on offense the last 2 games. A couple of the game analysis that I read over the last 3 weeks for Baylor have said that the offense just has seemed out of sync. That's not a good thing entering a game against Oklahoma, who's just going to outscore you.
Yes.
And Baylor faced a dual threat quarterback, not as prolific as Jalen Hurts, but Max Duggan last week for TCU, also a dual threat quarterback, caused Baylor defense some problems here.
Yeah.
Oklahoma ends Baylor's undefeated season.
Okay.
I feel like this is the week. TCU almost did it last week. I think Oklahoma can just outscore them. I really do. I know the Baylor defense is good. It's the best defense in the Big 12. I'm not sure it's going to matter.
For whatever that's worth.
Exactly. Yeah. Best defense by Big 12 standards.
Right.
Oklahoma wins this game, and the Big 12 is a dog and pony show again.
Okay. I referenced you've covered Jalen Hurts and what he has done, and it really is him. And the disappointing thing is, we talked about this early in the season, and it looked this way early in the season. OU has a 4th and goal here with 1:17 left. I'm going to do play-by-play here.
And they're going to call timeout.
Oh, works. We already done that.
We already did the timeout. Okay.
Shotgun looking, throws into double coverage as he does in the back of this end zone, and it's batted away. Okay.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. It's these things happen. We talked about the fact that OU and OU did have improved defensive performance in the early part of the season. I don't know if that has to do with the competition, but man, the last 2 outings, you win a game against Iowa State and still give up 41 points. You lose to K-State, middle of the pack team, both of them, middle of the pack team in your conference, and give up 48. And it's like, what happened? Where did this go? And if it's not for Jalen Hurts, I have no idea who Oklahoma's backup quarterback is, but if it's not for Jalen Hurts, this is not a good football team. Baylor, here's the thing. We talked about this a little bit last week. My comparison, my point of reference, of course, is the 2002 Ohio State Buckeyes, which won several games they should not have won. Right? The Baylor needed OT to beat TCU last week. Needed OT to beat Texas Tech earlier in the season. They're one of the few teams in the Big 12 who sort of plays defense, and maybe you saw a little bit of that in an earlier. I don't know how this happens in the Big 12, but they beat West Virginia 17-14. That's like a 1-quarter score in most in most Big 12 games. You need luck. You need luck to have a special season. And you need to appreciate the ugly wins because they're still wins. And if you do that, you put yourself in a good position. And beating Oklahoma at home, you will find yourself in the middle of the postseason discussion. And I'm going out on a limb for the second time this week, but I think that's what's going to happen. So, yeah, Baylor wins this.
Here's the challenge. If Baylor wins this game, they're going to have to play Oklahoma again, and trying to beat a team twice in the same season.
Yes, nightmare.
Really hard.
Nightmare. And we will, if that happens, we will get to it. I just have to be right about this one. Guys, you can find the Carla and Crappy Show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, as well as on a variety of other podcasting services. You can also watch us babble on YouTube and our Facebook page. If you dig the show, please subscribe, rate, and review. If you don't, mind your own damn business. And as always, come back next week to see exactly how wrong I was. Carla, any final thoughts?
I'm going to sneak the last game in.
Please do.
If Jalen Hurts is the picture of dual threat quarterback this year, like right next to the definition, the picture right next to Jalen Hurts is Malcolm Perry, the quarterback at Navy, who actually has rushed for more yards this season than passed. Yes. Navy's on the road this weekend at South Bend to play Notre Dame. Notre Dame better be ready for this triple option this year. You got a Navy team that is firing on the triple option. Mm-hmm. Malcolm Perry is the real deal. You know, anytime you get a team playing the triple option, it's always one of those, okay, here we go, hold on.
Challenge. It is a challenge.
Yes, it is a challenge. And so we will see if Notre Dame is up for the challenge. So don't let this one fall off your radar. It's 2 top 25 teams, believe it or not. Navy's ranked. Pay attention to this one.
I think that's an earlier start, 2 or 2:30 or something like that. Whatever.
I think so. Yeah.
Whatever whatever starting time in South Bend is.
For the record, go Navy.
I'm on board here as a veteran, and this being a Veterans Day week. I think that's an interesting thing, and it's possible. Mm-hmm. Because Notre Dame has struggled. They needed to eke out a win against Virginia Tech a couple weeks ago. And Tech's kind of middle of the road good team, so that's not a big surprise, but that is one worth watching. Absolutely. Carla, yes. Stay warm.
You too. This is coming your way. We're gonna be back up in the 50s by the time this weekend rolls around. So we'll be just fine.
We're not going to be up in the 50s, and then we are going to a wedding in North Carolina where it's supposed to be a little bit chillier than everyone expected for an outdoor wedding. So we're gonna bundle up and have some bourbon, and everything will be just fine. Guys, enjoy the games this weekend. Thank you very much for joining us, and please come back next week. Because we will do this again. Carla, cheers.
Cheers.
I love the mug.